Have you ever noticed how the guy who tries to do absolutely everything right, the ultimate people pleaser who avoids conflict at all costs?
Yeah, the guy who is constantly smoothing things over.
Exactly. That guy. The one bending over backward to keep his partner happy, never raising his voice. But here's the paradox. He is almost always secretly miserable.
Oh, entirely. It's a massive contradiction.
Right. Beneath that perfectly curated, easygoing exterior, he is harboring this massive, simmering reservoir of resentment. And, I mean, his romantic relationships are usually in a state of perpetual struggle.
It really defies our conventional logic, doesn't it?
It totally does.
Because you would naturally think that being endlessly accommodating, anticipating everyone's needs, and never making waves would be the ultimate formula for a happy, peaceful life.
Yeah, that's what we're all taught, right?
Exactly. But it actually generates a tremendous amount of internal and external chaos.
And that is exactly what we are exploring today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping right into the nice guy syndrome, looking really closely at the framework developed by Dr. Robert A. Glover.
It's a fascinating framework.
It really is. But look, we aren't here just to admire the problem or, diagnose the symptoms. The real mission of this deep dive is to outline a practical, step-by-step roadmap for you to shift from being a frustrated, exhausted people pleaser into what the author terms an integrated man.
Which requires a very important distinction right up front.
Oh, for sure.
This isn't about swinging the pendulum the other way.
Sure.
We aren't talking about how to become callous, aggressive, or, a jerk.
Right, because the opposite of crazy is still crazy.
Exactly. The goal is integration. Being an integrated man means bringing together all the fractured, isolated parts of yourself.
So owning the good and the bad.
Yes. It means finally accepting your power, your assertiveness, your right to take up space, and yes, your flaws, your mistakes, and your dark side. It's about striving for wholeness rather than an illusion of flawlessness.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we need to define what is actually driving this behavior in the first place.
Right. The root cause.
Yeah, it seems to be rooted in this incredibly pervasive false belief system. There's this assumption that if a man is just, good enough, giving enough, and cares enough about everyone else, he will automatically be loved.
And that his needs will magically be met without him ever having to ask.
Exactly. And that he'll live a completely frictionless life.
Precisely. It is a deeply ingrained life roadmap that assumes a perfect one-to-one ratio between hiding your imperfections and receiving love.
Like an unspoken transaction.
Unspoken, but very heavily enforced internally. But to really understand how to dismantle that roadmap, we have to look at the mechanics of why a man adopts it in the first place.
So it doesn't just come out of nowhere?
No, not at all. This intense need to curate a flawless image doesn't just emerge from a vacuum. It is deeply rooted in early childhood conditioning and something called toxic shame.
Toxic shame. Wow. And when we talk about childhood conditioning here, we aren't necessarily talking about extreme cinematic trauma?
Not necessarily, no.
Because a lot of guys looking at their own behavior might say, well, I had a pretty normal childhood, so this doesn't apply to me.
That is such a common misconception. Toxic shame doesn't only stem from severe abuse.
Okay, so where does it come from?
Well, when young boys experience any form of perceived abandonment.
Perceived being the key word there.
Exactly. Which could literally just be a parent projecting unrealistic expectations or, being emotionally unavailable due to work.
Oh, wow.
Or, conversely, smothering the child and not letting them individuate. The child's developing brain just can't process that rationally.
Because they're kids.
Right. Young children are inherently ego-centered. They literally lack the cognitive architecture to understand that external events aren't about them.
So if dad is constantly angry or mom is completely checked out, the kid doesn't think, oh, my parents are dealing with their own adult stress.
Exactly. The child's brain interprets the friction as, I am inherently bad, and my fundamental defectiveness is the reason I am not getting the love or safety I need.
Man, that is heavy.
It is. That internalized, localized belief of being fundamentally broken is toxic shame.
And so they build a defense mechanism against it.
Yes. To survive that terrifying feeling of vulnerability, the child creates a survival paradigm. They subconsciously decide, if being me gets me rejected, I need to completely hide anything about myself that might trigger disapproval.
And become exactly what they think these powerful adults want them to be.
Precisely.
But is this just an individual, isolated phenomenon, though?
What do you mean?
Well, looking around today, it feels like there is an entire generation of men who operate on this exact wavelength. Men who were raised to, apologize for their own shadows.
Oh, I see.
Is that just a coincidence of millions of individual family dynamics, or is there a larger sociological current at play?
It's really both, and the sociological context is crucial here. The framework we're looking at points out monumental social shifts that occurred post-World War II.
Okay, like what kind of shifts?
Well, you had a massive demographic shift where many boys grew up increasingly disconnected from their fathers.
Right, because of the workforce, the war, suburbs.
Exactly. Combined with changing cultural messaging and educational environments that often rewarded highly compliant, non-disruptive behavior.
So the environment itself favored the people pleaser.
Yes. And regardless of how we judge those broader cultural shifts today, the sociological reality is that there was immense systemic pressure on young men to repress traditional, sometimes boisterous or aggressive male traits.
And seek validation elsewhere.
Right, to seek primary validation from the women in their lives, like mothers, teachers, and eventually romantic partners.
It's like trying to run a modern smartphone on an operating system built in 1995.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
Right, like when you were a powerless kid navigating an unpredictable environment, that hyper-vigilant, people-pleasing operating system was brilliant. It kept you emotionally safe.
It did its job perfectly.
But now you're an adult. You're trying to navigate complex, nuanced relationships, assert boundaries, and handle true intimacy. And that 1995 OS is just constantly crashing.
What's fascinating here is how the brain responds when that operating system inevitably crashes.
It doesn't just update automatically, does it?
I wish. Because these paradigms were written into the subconscious during childhood,
Yeah.
the man doesn't realize the software itself is outdated.
Oh, so he blames himself.
Exactly. When his approach fails, when he isn't getting the appreciation, the promotion, or the intimacy he thinks he has earned, he doesn't question the paradigm.
So what does he do?
His only response is to just try harder. He doubles down. He tries to be even nicer, even more accommodating.
Wow. So what does this all mean for you if your entire childhood paradigm relies on seeking external validation to feel safe? How do you actually start updating the OS?
It's not easy.
Because you can't just tell someone whose entire nervous system is wired for approval to, just be yourself.
No, you absolutely can't. The first major shift requires deliberately flipping the script.
Okay.
You have to systematically replace that desperate external approval seeking with radical self-acceptance. And this is terrifying because the nice guy typically operates as what's called a Teflon man.
A Teflon man, meaning like nothing sticks to him.
Exactly. He tries to be so smooth, so agreeable, and so flawlessly accommodating that no criticism or negativity can possibly stick to him.
So he's hiding all his rough edges.
He hides his mistakes, his bodily functions, his anger, his controversial opinions, literally anything that makes him a messy, three-dimensional human being.
But here is the profound psychological irony. Human beings do not connect through perfection.
We absolutely do not.
We connect through our rough edges. We bond over shared vulnerabilities and mutual struggles.
Yes. Because the Teflon man presents a frictionless synthetic surface, no one can actually get a grip on him.
So he ends up feeling alone anyway.
Consequently, he feels profoundly isolated and unseen, even when he's married or in a crowded room.
He's basically a social chameleon. I remember reading about guys who will literally morph their entire personality depending on the room they are in.
It's a survival tactic.
Right. If they're with intellectuals, they use complex jargon. With blue-collar buddies, they swear and talk sports. With their parents, they are the perfectly submissive son.
Morphing to whatever is safe.
Underneath all those masks, there is zero solid identity. So practically speaking, how does a guy stop changing colors?
It requires concrete behavioral disruption. One highly effective method is an approval-seeking moratorium.
A moratorium, meaning you just cut it off entirely.
Well, you can't fix everything at once, so you identify one specific chronic way you seek validation.
Okay, give me an example.
Maybe it's meticulously detailing your partner's car without being asked just to get a thank you. Or maybe it's biting your tongue when your boss takes credit for your work.
And you just stop.
You consciously choose to stop that specific behavior for a set period of time.
And just sit there in the discomfort.
Yes, you let the anxiety wash over you.
Yeah.
You have to physically prove to your nervous system that you can withhold that people-pleasing behavior, not get the gold star, and still survive.
That sounds brutal.
It is at first. But an even deeper exercise involves dismantling the toxic shame directly. And this requires bringing the hidden parts of yourself into the light.
So talking about it.
Yes. This often means revealing your deepest, darkest secrets or perceived flaws to what we call safe people.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
For a guy whose core operating system tells him that if anyone sees his flaws, he will be abandoned to die. I mean, confessing his worst mistakes, his embarrassing habits, or his failures to a group of men or a therapist sounds like absolute social suicide.
It really does.
How does that not just trigger a massive panic attack and backfire?
Well, it does trigger immense anxiety initially. But toxic shame operates like a fungus. It can only grow in the dark.
Oh, I like that.
It relies entirely on secrecy. When a man finally speaks his darkest secret aloud to a supportive, non-judgmental group, and the group doesn't gasp, doesn't shun him, but simply nods and says, yeah, I've struggled with that too.
It breaks the spell.
It fundamentally rewires his brain. The cognitive distortion shatters. He physically experiences the reality that his flaws do not equal abandonment.
So what does this all mean for you if your entire identity is built on fixing things for other people to look good?
It's a huge shift.
Because if you successfully drop the chameleon act, you suddenly hit a terrifying wall. You actually have to figure out what you want.
Exactly.
And these guys love to project this aura of being completely low maintenance, right? They act like they have zero needs.
It's an elaborate illusion.
Yeah.
They project that low maintenance aura because they equate having needs with being a burden.
And being a burden leads to rejection.
Exactly.
What?
But beneath that stoic facade, they are often incredibly needy.
Well, yeah, they're human.
Right. The problem is, because they are terrified to ask for what they want directly, they rely heavily on covert contracts.
Covert contracts. I have watched guys operate on these, and it is maddening.
They're everywhere once you know what to look for.
Right. I've seen guys spend an entire Saturday reorganizing the garage, totally unasked, and then spend the whole evening radiating passive-aggressive anger because their partner didn't throw them a parade or initiate intimacy.
Yes.
What is actually happening in their heads there?
That is the covert contract in action. It is an unconscious, unspoken agreement that dictates, I will do this specific thing for you, so that you will do this specific thing for me, and we will both pretend there is no contract.
Oh, man. So they are giving to get.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But because the partner has absolutely no idea they've been drafted into this invisible contract, they rarely fulfill their end of the bargain.
And that failure to collect on the debt triggers a massive cascade.
Exactly. It plunges the man directly into what is known as the victim triangle.
Okay, what is the victim triangle?
It starts with caretaking, which means giving from a place of inner emptiness with heavy strings attached.
Right, the garage cleaning.
Then, when the universe doesn't pay up, massive toxic resentment builds. Finally, the pressure cooker explodes into passive-aggressive behavior, which is accurately termed victim puke.
The victim pukes. That term is so visceral but so accurate.
It paints a picture, doesn't it?
It really does. It's the chronic lateness, suddenly withdrawing affection, the sharp sarcastic jabs, or, inexplicably blowing up over a loaded dishwasher.
Right.
It is the furthest thing from actually being nice. It's manipulative. So the roadmap for fixing this involves doing something that goes against every fiber of their being.
Right.
Becoming selfish.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to deeply understand the critical difference between caretaking and genuine caring.
Okay, break that down for me.
Caretaking, as we just discussed, is a transaction driven by scarcity. Genuine caring is giving from a place of abundance, with absolutely zero strings attached.
And you can only do that if you're good yourself.
Exactly. You can only give from abundance if your own cup is full. Therefore, a man has to take ruthless responsibility for meeting his own needs first.
Right. Consider a guy who is the classic overgiver in a relationship. I know of an exercise where a guy like this, let's call him Shane, was challenged to put himself first for 1 full week.
Well, that's a tough exercise.
Right. Every time he had the compulsive impulse to do something for his girlfriend, like washing her car on a Sunday morning to win favor, he had to stop and do it for himself instead.
So what did he do?
He washed his own car. He called a buddy to go for a run instead of hovering around her waiting to be useful.
And I'm sure he was terrified.
Completely. I would think that sudden withdrawal of servitude would make a partner pack her bags.
The fear of exactly that is what keeps men trapped. But she didn't leave, did she?
No, she didn't.
In fact, she likely became more relaxed and loving toward him. Why? Because the heavy, suffocating weight of the covert contracts was lifted off her shoulders.
She didn't have to manage his invisible debts?
Exactly. She didn't have to constantly manage his hidden emotional needs anymore. By claiming his own happiness, he shifted from a paradigm of scarcity to abundance. He stopped sucking the emotional oxygen out of the room.
But practically speaking, prioritizing yourself inevitably means you are going to collide with other people's expectations.
Unavoidably.
You are going to have to say no. You are going to disappoint people. Which brings us directly to a people pleaser's ultimate kryptonite.
Conflict.
Conflict.
Conflict in the outdated childhood operating system is synonymous with death. It means disapproval and abandonment.
So they avoid it at all costs.
Yes. So when confronted with any friction, these men instinctively deploy the DEAR response. That stands for defend, explain, excuse, and rationalize.
Oh, wow. Defend, explain, excuse, rationalize.
Yes. They will rapidly spout out any combination of words to diffuse the tension and distract the other person from their perceived badness.
And it completely destroys their boundaries.
It absolutely does.
There's this brilliant shoestring analogy that explains this lack of boundaries perfectly.
Oh, I love this one.
Picture a shoestring lying on the floor between two people. That represents a personal boundary. Someone steps over the shoestring and verbally or emotionally pushes the guy.
And what does he do?
Instead of planting his feet and saying stop right there at the shoestring, the guy takes a step backward to de-escalate and keep the peace.
Right.
Then the person pushes again, another step back. He will let someone push him all the way across the room until his back is flat against the wall, rather than endure the momentary, sharp discomfort of holding the line at the shoestring.
That constant retreat is the exact opposite of integrated leadership.
So what does integrated leadership look like then?
Well, integrated leadership isn't about dominating others. It is the willingness to provide for and protect the integrity of the relationship by standing firmly in reality.
Standing at the shoestring.
Exactly. It means having the emotional fortitude to tolerate the temporary discomfort of setting a boundary, because you know that boundary is what keeps the relationship healthy.
But how do you actually do that in the heat of the moment?
It takes practice.
When your nervous system is screaming that conflict equals death, how do you hold the line at the shoestring?
You need cognitive bypass tools to short-circuit the panic. Two very effective mental heuristics are the second date rule and the healthy male rule.
Okay, tell me about the second date rule.
The second date rule asks you to look at an unacceptable behavior from a partner or a boss and ask, if she did this to me on the second date, would I ever ask her out on a third?
Oh, man, that is clarifying.
Right. If the honest answer is no, then you are actively tolerating the intolerable simply because of time served.
And the healthy male rule?
The healthy male rule asks you to step out of your own triggered perspective and ask, how would a healthy, integrated, confident man handle this exact situation?
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the psychology behind enforcing these boundaries reminds me of operant conditioning.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, if a puppy pees on the living room rug and you immediately give him a treat, you guarantee he is going to pee on the rug again.
You are literally rewarding the dysfunction.
Exactly. Yeah, I see guys do this constantly in relationships. If a partner is raging, being hypercritical, or acting incredibly toxic, the guy immediately responds by apologizing, trying to fix the problem, or soothing her.
That is a brilliant, albeit painful, realization. It is basic operant conditioning applied to human dynamics.
It's wild to see it happen in real time.
The man genuinely believes he is keeping the peace by soothing the toxic behavior.
Yeah.
But psychologically, he is giving the dog a treat for peeing on the rug.
So he's reinforcing it.
He is actively reinforcing the exact behavior that is destroying him. If he truly wants the dynamic to change, he has to stop rewarding the dysfunction.
He has to let them be upset.
Yes, he has to plant his feet, state his boundary calmly, and let the chips fall where they may, even if the other person throws a tantrum.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a fast track to a breakup.
It does feel that way.
If you spend 5 years catering to someone's every whim and suddenly you stop caretaking, stop apologizing for things you didn't do, and start setting hard boundaries, well, you'd naturally assume the relationship would instantly implode.
But paradoxically, making these exact shifts is often the only thing that saves the relationship.
How does that even work?
It radically alters the entire power dynamic. Let's look at how the partner experiences this shift. Often, a deeply enmeshed, people-pleasing man acts like what we call a table dog.
A table dog.
Yeah, he literally hovers around his partner's emotional table, waiting for scraps of attention, validation, or sex.
Ouch. That is a tough image.
When he finally stops hovering and goes to live his own life, the partner initially feels highly disoriented. They will almost always push back.
See if it's real.
Yes, they will escalate their demands or test the new boundaries just to see if this new spine is actually real or if it's just a phase.
I think about a story I heard regarding a couple, let's call them Jake and Keisha. Early in their marriage, Keisha had an affair.
A major boundary violation.
Massive. And Jake, operating on the ultimate flawed paradigm, just swallowed his anger and tried to nice her back into loving him.
Which never works.
Right. He spent years walking on eggshells, measuring every single word so he wouldn't upset her. Eventually, the pain became too great. He hit a breaking point, packed his bags, looked her in the eye, and told her he was absolutely done tolerating her disrespect, and he was leaving.
And Keisha's reaction in that moment, and in the days that followed, tells us everything we need to know about human attraction.
What happened?
Well, initially she was furious. She threw a fit. But a few days later, she approached him and admitted that for the first time in their entire marriage, she actually felt genuine respect for him.
Wow. Just because he walked away?
He suddenly wanted to do the work to save the marriage, specifically because he had finally shown the strength to leave.
It is the ultimate paradox of the integrated man. A lot of guys think women want a completely agreeable, pleasing wimp who just caters to their every whim.
But they don't.
They really don't. They want a partner who has the strength and self-respect to stand up to them.
Yes, because if a man is strong enough to stand up to his partner, it proved to her nervous system that he is strong enough to stand up for her when the world gets tough.
It creates a profound emotional security.
Exactly. A security that a frictionless Teflon man can never provide.
That makes total sense. And it doesn't just apply to emotional boundaries, it translates directly into physical intimacy too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because these guys bring all of their covert contracts right into the bedroom. They try to be the perfect lover, focusing entirely on the partner's pleasure, not out of passion, but as a desperate bid to secure validation.
Which is exhausting for both people.
Which inevitably leads to incredibly disconnected, predictable, and frankly, boring sex. So how does a guy break that deeply wired physical habit?
The most effective, albeit radical tool for this is the sexual moratorium.
Wait, taking sex off the table?
Entirely.
That sounds like a cruel punishment for a guy who already feels starved for physical affection.
It sounds counterintuitive, I know. For a set period, sometimes weeks or even months, the couple agrees to take intercourse completely off the menu. No exceptions.
But why?
Its purpose isn't punishment, it's liberation. By entirely removing the goal of sex, you abruptly break the toxic cycle where the man pursues and the partner distances.
Oh, I see.
It forces the man to sit with his anxiety and realize that he can actually survive without using his partner's body as his personal security blanket.
It clears the air. Because if sex isn't an option, he can't give a back rub with an ulterior motive.
Exactly. The covert contracts evaporate. It allows genuine, pressure-free intimacy to organically emerge. He learns to take responsibility for his own pleasure and presence.
Which changes the whole vibe.
It ironically makes him grounded, unpredictable, and vastly more attractive to his partner once the moratorium is lifted. This raises an important question about how the integrated man views his partner as he goes through this journey.
Yeah, how does that perspective change?
A people pleaser often subconsciously selects fixer-uppers so he can feel valuable, or he views his partner as a broken project that needs his constant management.
Always trying to save the day.
Right, but the integrated man shifts this perspective entirely. He begins to view the relationship as a mirror.
A mirror, so reflecting back on himself.
Exactly. When his partner is angry, demanding, or distant, instead of frantically trying to manage her emotions, he pauses and asks himself, what is this triggering inside of me? How is my reaction to her right now reflecting my own unresolved childhood wounds?
That is so powerful.
The partner ceases to be a project and instead becomes a companion in mutual healing.
That is a massive paradigm shift. What a wild, counterintuitive journey. Okay, let's take a breath and recap where we've been because we have covered some massive psychological ground today.
We certainly have.
We started by unpacking how those outdated childhood paradigms, fueled by toxic shame and a misunderstanding of what makes us worthy of love, create the buggy operating system of the people pleaser.
The 1995 OS.
Exactly. We dug into how radical self-acceptance is the only thing that destroys the desperate need for external validation. We explored the mechanics of dismantling covert contracts, the absolute necessity of prioritizing your own needs to escape the victim triangle.
And setting those boundaries.
Yes. Finally, we saw how enforcing uncompromising boundaries doesn't push people away. It paradoxically creates the ultimate foundation for genuine respect, true intimacy, and integrated leadership.
It is nothing short of a radical transformation from quiet powerlessness to genuine, grounded personal power. And as we conclude our time together, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over in your own life.
Let's hear it.
If your entire existence has been built on a secret, unspoken contract, a contract where you constantly trade away your true, authentic self in exchange for the illusion of a smooth, conflict-free existence, what beautiful, unpredictable, and deeply fulfilling chaos might you invite into your life if you finally decided to just be yourself, warts and all?
Imagine finally throwing out that exhausting, heavy chameleon suit. Stop trying to diagnose exactly what everyone else wants you to be, and stop trying to present a clean, frictionless surface. Step into the messy, complex, profoundly liberating reality of who you actually are. That is where the real connection happens. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.